G'day, AJ Mahari again. Whether you live in a world of hurt because you have codependency and or you've been in a relationship with someone with BPD, or you're still trying to find your way out of a relationship with somebody with BPD or a narcissist, whatever the case is, it's really important that people start to understand. I know people know this probably in their heads, right? But you need to start to understand what is it that you need to know more about yourself emotionally, as I probably said in different ways in a few videos or more, and on a lot of live streams as well. When children are wounded in childhood, or a parent isn't emotionally available, or parents are fighting, whatever might cause you that abandonment wound, which abandonment means a lot of different things, and it's a different degree. It's not as deep as the core abandonment wound of somebody with BPD. But it's really important for codependents to realize that there are codependent relational patterns that go back to your childhood, to something that you learned in childhood, to something that you had to make an adaptation around a parent about, something going on in your family. And where does this leave people with codependency? Well, not really knowing yourself. Yes, you know yourself more than a person with BPD does, or you did before you got in a relationship with a person with BPD. And now maybe, it's been like a while, or a year or 2 or 3 or 5 or more, and now you're not so sure who you are. But did you really know your own emotional landscape well enough from childhood? And the answer for people with codependency is really no, because that's how you get it. That's how you end up with, quote, codependency, end quote. And the relational patterns have said that begin in childhood. Children do learn what they live. So there's many ways and different iterations of how this happens to people with codependency. But what's really important to know, like I've said in another video, it's not really that you have this amazing extra super duper empathy. You might be really an empathic person, yes. But that isn't what happened in your childhood. That's not how something got turned around and you had to adapt to something that created, an adverse childhood experience for you that was emotionally impacting enough to leave you with a wound, usually of abandonment and or shame, and maybe more than one. And the thing is, to a certain level, though, not to the same level of those who are, very have a lot of adverse childhood experience in their life that have BPD. So I think, again, it will benefit codependents to think about how much you're not thinking about yourself, how much you're not focusing on yourself. Why are you pouring out so much effort, time, energy, either on a cluster B or on learning about cluster B and on doing your own, quote, diagnoses of the cluster B? What about you? Now, this is going to be, I hope, not too long and a very simple message, but hopefully an important one for people with codependency. What about you? Don't you deserve to be given half even the love that you're giving away all the time, which is not, by the way, in codependent relational patterns, the love that people give is not as healthy as one thinks, because with each bit of love that you give to someone else who's basically just not able to reciprocate or be mutual and is just sort of like devouring that love, for lack of a better way to put it, taking it inside and trying to, help themselves out with it somehow. What about self-love? What about you? Again, I'm going to say. And why do you think it is that you are, so many clients I work with, this is such a theme, right? And people that come to live streams on the channel and people that leave comments on the channel, such a huge theme for people with codependency is how much you worry about what other people think about you, or what they would think about you if like you cared about yourself, or if you took care of yourself, or if you stopped overgiving, trying to rescue, trying to fix the borderline or the narcissist. If you really took time to get to know you better, to stop abandoning yourself, you would probably feel most people with codependency in live streams and comments on the channel and clients I work with and have worked with for over 30 years now, they just say they would feel really guilty if they really did what they needed to do. And then, like I've said in other videos, there's that avoidance or denial of one's own pain. Usually it's not just denial or avoidance, it's usually both. And an aversion to one's own pain from childhood, and now what you're dealing with from all the pain of a relationship with a cluster B that you're in, that you're accruing, the damage is building. And people with codependency keep ignoring self to their own detriment to do what for the other? Can't rescue, can't fix, can't save, can't change. And even if you could make them go to therapy, people with BPD, narcissists, hardly likely, maybe a vulnerable narcissist, but even then, with BPD or even like traits of NPD or comorbid BPD, NPD, the recovery, if people are going to be able to get to full recovery or largely recovered or much, much better, it takes years. And you can't, so people with codependency are pulling so much to get someone to therapy to change things. And couples counseling, never a good idea. So many people end up with marriage and family counselors who don't understand borderline personality, or for that matter, codependency, or narcissistic personality disorder. It's not usually what they're dealing with in working with couples. Because if you have codependency, you need to take care of that. Person has borderline personality or traits of narcissism or BPD, NPD comorbid, they have to deal with that. There's no way to bring that together in a therapeutic process that makes any sense. In fact, I've had so many clients tell me, they tried to go, with the ex, they tried to go to couples counseling, and I've heard nothing but horror stories about how that usually works out. So, and then there are some people who are just so busy, in the chaos and the drama. You're just caught up. You're lost to yourself now. You're so caught up in the chaos and the drama of the person with BPD or whatever relationship type or narcissist that you don't spend any time really thinking about yourself or taking care of yourself or ever put yourself first, even just for a little while or half a day. And a lot of people with codependency don't take the time out to get into their own healing and recovery work because it's like they just don't think about it. The focus is all over the place and the focus is everywhere else. And the drama and the chaos that no doubt are mirroring something from your childhood to one degree or another, so addictive, right? So alluring, so impossible feeling, as people say, to let go of. Because then what? Then what? And for people that already have enough knowledge intellectually about BPD, about NPD, about codependency, you know a lot about this now, but it's not in your emotional landscape. You're not working on you maybe yet, and you're not working on a change, recovery, healing process, then all that you know intellectually, how is that really going to help you? Because really, for people with codependency and in a different way, people with BPD, the more that people with BPD or codependents know about their own issues intellectually, it's not enough to filter it into your emotional landscape to create the change in yourself only that you want to change, create, and that you need, to be healthy and more balanced. So I think people with codependency really need to think about the seriousness of this. It used to be very poorly defined, and it's been redefined and re-recognized for the adverse childhood experience that creates codependency, as well as it creates so many other things, but it's at different levels, right? So there are some people with BPD that have codependency, a lot of them, but a lot of people with codependency don't have BPD. So different levels of woundedness. Maybe the sensitive temperament in those with BPD versus more resiliency in those with codependency. But if you feel like you do have, or you might have grown up with a resilient temperament, I'll bet if you've been in a relationship with a borderline or a narcissist for any significant period of time, your resiliency is breaking down. You're losing that. You're losing yourself. So I would just ask you to think about today, if you watch this video, what about you? What about you? And what about you? Where's your focus most of the time? Because I bet it's not on you. So why not? Why not more? Why? What do you think that's about? Because these are the things that codependents need to ask themselves and get into recovery work and in therapy about, because there are things that you need to know more about yourself, your childhood, your life, and how it is you got into the relationship that you're in now, because nobody made you do it. It's really important for codependents to realize how sometimes they also struggle with personal responsibility. And again, the Codependents Anonymous 12-step program is not recovery from codependency, from what we really understand codependency to be, to mean, and the toll that it takes on people's lives. People with codependency can be in an incredible amount of pain before they even recognize that they're in pain. But you're suffering, but you're just not on board with it because you're so focused on the cluster B. So I'll just say again, what about you? And it's helpful to stay out of the narrative that you got way too much empathy, because it's really not about the empathy. You might really be an empathic person, obviously. I'm not trying to take away from that, from you. But if you can't ask the question, what about you? Like, what about me, meaning you? How could you have so much empathy to give to someone else? And you do, right? But it's not all about the empathy, is what I'm trying to say. But how could you give so much empathy and so much focus and effort and hollow yourself out, be hollowed out by it, not by the person with BPD, but by your own choices of what you're doing? That's repetition, compulsion, codependent patterns, that relational patterns that aren't healthy for you either. So, what about you today? When's the last time you sat down by yourself and just sat with yourself? Do you give yourself ever the opportunity to feel? Some people do, but then they run from that. Gotta distract from that. This is one of the biggest reasons why people have a really hard time leaving a person with BP or a narcissist when they need to, or way after the point at which you needed to for yourself. Keep abandoning yourself to focusing on them, because for codependence, it's an avoidance of self, and it goes back to something in your childhood. So I hope that you can hear this message in the way I intend it, to be helpful to you. So I'll ask one more time for you to think about, what about you today? Ask yourself, what about me? Meaning you. Yeah, I don't really pay much attention to myself. And when you start to do that, and it's best to get into a recovery process and work in therapy with that also, a lot of people with codependency come to realize that, especially after cluster B relationships, they don't know who they are anymore. But even if you knew who you were before, to some degree, there was something about yourself you didn't really know or understand consciously. A woundedness, a pain, something that you've been running from all your life in what is the codependent relational styles of overgiving and giving and giving way beyond when it hurts and when you're being hurt, with no mutuality, no reciprocity, or very little. Total self-abandonment. What about you today? What are you afraid of? If you ask yourself, what about you today? If you say, what about me? to yourself, sitting with yourself, maybe sitting down to journal. Well, what about me? Most people with codependency have a hard time doing that at one point or another, because it's going to be an experience of getting in touch with all the pain that you're really truly in. But you do deserve to do that so that you can start to move forward. This over obsessing and focusing on cluster Bs for people with codependency, it's devouring you. So try to think about that today. Think about it more if you're not already thinking about it. And do a journal exercise entitled, What About Me? Ask yourself, where am I for me? Do I matter? You're going to get in touch with a lot of the pain of your wounded inner child. Stop running from it, because that's what people with codependency are doing in trying to fix the woundedness of a cluster B. What about you today? Take care.